this lecture, we will explore several definitions of reading fluency as an introduction to the complexity involved in the task of reading text accurately, fluently, and for meaning. We will examine several theoretical models of how fluent reading develops. You will engage in an activity to experience how fluent reading of text is related to reading comprehension. Before we start, what is your definition of reading fluency? Take a few seconds to jot down your own definition of reading fluency. You are already familiar with the simple view of reading. Oral reading fluency doesn't seem to be represented in this simple view. Fluency has been described as the bridge between word recognition and reading comprehension. Some people might assume that means fluency isn't important, but that is absolutely false. Reading fluency is considered a necessary but not sufficient prerequisite to comprehension. Fluency and automaticity in the component skills represented in word recognition and language comprehension facilitate and lead to reading comprehension. There are many definitions of reading fluency in the research literature. There isn't a single agreed upon definition, which makes it challenging, but you'll recognize commonalities across various definitions. As you read in the report of the National Reading Panel, reading fluency is an essential skill. In the National Reading Panel report, it is defined as reading accurately at a conversational pace with appropriate prosody. In the 20 years since the National Reading Panel report, there has been extensive research on reading fluency, which has expanded our understanding of what is involved in fluent reading and helped to shape additional definitions like the one you see here. What is emerging is that fluency is a complex process that represents the culmination of developing fluency in several skills that form the foundation of reading comprehension. Automatic processing of information and automatic processing of component skills are required. We will explore those underlying components in future lectures. In this definition, you can see the representation of the underlying component skills that you have learned about in the speech-to-print book. You can see the idea of a reader's perceptual skill at automatically translating letters into coherent sound representations. So this involves knowledge of phonology, orthography, even letter knowledge, and phoneme-grapheme mapping. You can also see here the idea of unitizing those sound components into recognizable wholes. This involves letter-sound blending. You also see accessing lexical representations. This involves automatic sight word recognition and orthographic mapping. You'll see processing meaningful connections within and between sentences. This involves knowledge of syntax and also vocabulary. You also see in this definition relating text meaning to prior information, all of the background knowledge and memory processes that are involved in reading. And finally, making inferences to supply missing information, which is ultimately the main task of reading comprehension. Let's ask, what do all these definitions have in common? What are the basic ideas about reading fluency that we need to attend to in a working definition? They all involve recognition of reading accurately, fluently, and for meaning. A key idea in reading fluency is automaticity. What is automaticity? It's a little bit different from fluency, and we might say that fluency depends on automaticity. Automaticity means the execution of a skill or mental activity without conscious attention. Automaticity means that we're not thinking about what we're doing, we're just doing it. In fact, most complex behaviors have elements of automaticity within them. Automaticity is about a response. A response can be automatic. It is obligatory. It requires few processing resources. It's outside of conscious control. Reading fluency needs to become that automatic. When assessing fluency, we don't know if a fluent response is also automatic. Even though these terms can be defined differently, most people use automaticity and fluency interchangeably when referring to reading. The brain is a limited capacity processor, and that means that there are limited attentional resources available at any one time. And if we then can execute some of the skills automatically, we have more processing power left over for higher level reasoning. Another key idea in the area of reading fluency is accuracy. It's impossible to be fluent unless you are accurate as well as automatic. So the idea of prosody is showing up in these definitions as well. But what is prosody? It is the rhythm and intonation of reading. Prosodic reading is rhythmic and has intonation that itself indicates comprehension. We know that someone is understanding what they are reading because they're providing stress patterns, phrasing, and emphasis that is both a product of comprehension and an indicator of comprehension. Another key idea in our definitions of reading fluency is that the speed must be sufficient to permit comprehension. Comprehension is the reason that we read. If we read too fast, we may not comprehend. Think of a time when you were trying to skim an article or a book really quickly. You probably could only pick out a few key ideas at best. Think about reading too slowly and the cost on comprehension. We can't construct a mental model of the meanings in that text because we're losing pieces as we go. So reading comprehension depends on reading with sufficient speed that supports comprehension. So I'm sure you're getting a sense of the complex nature and the reciprocal nature of fluency and reading comprehension. There's a great deal of research on this topic and a lot is known, but the exact nature of this complex relationship is not known. To guide our work with students in schools, we will explore the assumptions and theoretical models discussed in the Hudson article. The models provide a set of assumptions about what reading fluency is, what it requires, and how it is related to reading comprehension. The four-part processor model is based in the work of Seidenberg and McClelland and Adams. It assumes the processing taking place during reading is parallel rather than serial. The model illustrates the interconnection of the visual or orthographic form of words, the sound or phonology of the word, the meaning of the word, and the context in which the word is used, all together in a parallel fashion to decode words and gain their meaning. There is a reciprocal relationship between the lower level and higher level processes. This model should start to prime your thinking about the complexity involved in fluent reading. How do words become words that can be read automatically? How do they become sight words? Students have to become automatic at the lexical and sublexical levels. Lexical refers to words and word meanings. Using the lexical route to meaning involves recognizing words by sight alone. This is the goal for all words. Using the sublexical route means sounding out written words, identifying the word's constituent parts, graphemes and phonemes, and applying knowledge of morphology and syntax to read the word. This is how you read non-words until they become automatic, and then you use the lexical route when they become stored in long-term memory. That is the goal. Orthographic mapping is the theory of how we move words from sublexical to lexical. It is believed that it takes about 4 exposures to the word to move it into long-term memory and make it a sight word. Fluent reading requires students to become automatic at the sublexical level, the analytical process of phonemic decoding, and at the lexical level, which is the instant connection of the printed word to its meaning and pronunciation. The main process for moving words to this place of automaticity is repeated practice with consistent pairings of letters and sounds. Once a word is learned, it can't be suppressed. This has been demonstrated with studies on what's called the Stroop effect. Reading fluency follows a predictable pattern of development from the use of visual cues for words, the pre-alphabetic stage, to using the alphabetic principle to decode unfamiliar words in text, all the way to reading words instantly by sight. As students become more automatic with word recognition, their cognitive desk space is freed up to focus on the meaning of the text. This is the level of reading fluency that supports comprehension. Students should achieve this by the end of 2nd grade. The Hudson et al. Article presents a conceptual model of reading fluency. They see it as a complex culmination of multiple component processes. Assessing and understanding these component processes may help teachers uncover why a student is having difficulty understanding grade level text. Their model focuses on reading accuracy and rate. Their model attempts to explain the skills required for accuracy and fluency. It is hierarchical. Assessing each skill will help teachers know where to focus instruction and move students forward toward fluency and comprehension. Because indicators of reading fluency, like oral reading fluency, are timed measures, some people have misunderstood and thought reading fluency was about speed. In fact, speed in a skill is a natural artifact of automaticity. So the goal is not speed, but speed will be present when a skill is so overlearned and automatic that you can perform it fluently. Some popular authors and speakers are now saying that reading fluency isn't important, that what is important is fluency in the component skills. As you will learn, this is a false dichotomy. Both things are essential, fluency in the component skills and fluency in reading connected text. Fluency in the underlying skills does not guarantee fluency in reading text. It is fluency in reading text that serves as the metric for reading comprehension. Most definitions of reading fluency involve the components of reading accurately, at an appropriate pace, and reading for meaning. Reading fluency is not about speed. The models discussed in this lecture have implications for assessment and instruction that will be unpacked in future lectures.